Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host kushalmehra. So, a lot of so so let me frame this and give me a couple of minutes, everyone, to frame this discussion today. I have long been a very vocal votary of opposing banning big tech for the longest time. And when I say opposing banning big tech, I want to clarify that by big tech, it's a large umbrella term. Different places have different views. Harsh had a slightly different view than mine. Harsh always had a very national security view. And there was a particular incident that happened recently. I want to give credit to a fantastic internet journalist. He does great journalism. His handle is journalist V, and he shared the details of uh, um, a Vikas Yadav case where how Gmail was basically given permission by the Americans to look into all the details. Now, I am not here as a spokesperson of Vikas Yadav, and nor am I endorsing what Vikas Yadav has done allegedly. All I'm saying is that it was enough for me to raise the alarm bells and for a change admit to Harsh begrudgingly that Harsh was right. And Harsh must have been very happy and saying साले देख तुझे मैंने बोला था ये problem हो सकती है. And today's discussion is about, listen, we understand network externalities. I'm still very much someone who opposes a ban, but there are some things that have to be controlled. And how do we control that? And this discussion is going to be nuanced on the basis of that. We are not talking about blanket bans. We're not talking about shutting India down. We're not talking about shutting everything down. We are talking about a ban means what. Now, having laced that, Harsh, once again, thank you very much for coming, and let's start the discussion now.
Thank you so much, Kushal. I think all of our views over the years have changed on one topic or the other. In fact, I mean, I always call myself these days a recovering libertarian or a former libertarian. So I definitely did not have the views I have today 5 or 10 years ago. So, I mean, my views have also changed on this issue and more broadly on a lot of issues. Um, One big factor is, of course, China. And one big factor is actually now, of course, America's economic nationalism turn. Uh, Once you start studying deeper economic and political history, then you realize actually nothing is really new under the sun. All of this has happened in one way or the form before as well. So it was us who were living in through a very particular moment of time who had then extrapolated it to a general libertarian philosophy. Now, having been a libertarian, you're always sympathetic towards it. I mean, your default is always to allow maximum freedom, which remains my position as well. So, just to first answer the way you framed the question and the way you framed it on Twitter or social media or X, no, I'm not for absolute bans. I think it will be very nuanced, step by step. In fact, even within big tech, as you rightly mentioned, Kushal, it's a very umbrella term. उसमें किसी में थोड़े ज़्यादा, some have more network externalities, some have less network externalities. The email is a bit different from chat/WhatsApp, which in turn is different from social media, which in turn may be different from Microsoft Office and Windows or equivalent operating systems, which may also be different, by the way, for cell phone or smartphone based OS, and of course now AI. So it's not one size fits all, and even where something approaching a ban may make sense, we have to be cognizant nonetheless of the fact that while China did many such things in 2008-9, it was not a superpower, but nonetheless it was a rising power. And India's aim is not here to needlessly antagonize anybody. It is to achieve certain economic and national security goals. And if it can be done with the lightest of touch, then that is always much more preferable. If it can be done by not just ending foreign monopolies, but even domestic private sector monopolies. For example, digital public infrastructure. UPI is a classic case of the government building what we now call digital public infrastructure, on top of which, as a front end or as an additional layer, various private apps plug and play, right? Similarly, we have account aggregator for financial data, Sehmati, etc. We are going to do something similar for land records. So there are a variety of ways we'll approach this. But the first thing is, before we go to the solutions, let us very quickly rephrase the motivation for even discussing this in the first place, right? Because even though you and I have discussed this on your podcast, I think 2-3 times at least, but Nonetheless, for people now joining, let us just, if it's okay with you, just very quickly to frame why we are even discussing this in the first place. I think you gave the example of obviously Gmail or etc. being used by foreign spy agencies. Absolutely. We also saw with an Indian incorporated refinery, Nayara Energy, Microsoft having suspended its own data access, the refinery's data access, for a day, and then they went to court. We thought it was over, but then S&P just did that. SAP just did that. SAP, to be fair, is not US big tech; it's German big tech, so to speak. But SAP did that. At least SAP had the excuse of enforcing sanctions based on its headquarters, which is European sanctions. Although I don't think extraterritorially it should apply to India, but nonetheless, uh, Microsoft had gone one step ahead. So there are Indian companies and Indian individuals are already being affected by that. And let us be very clear: all Indian data online is, I say this always, available to the US government on their fingertips. In the sense that something like FISA, these all these post 9/11 laws with Orwellian names. My former libertarian comes back, especially when I talk about other governments. Conveniently enough, Section 702, for example, mandates any sharing of foreigners' information, digital information, with the U.S. government without any warrant. Right. So it's not something. This is new. This is old. Uh, we it There was a moment post Cold War, 1991, and there was this whole zeitgeist around the internet that it will be completely a level playing field and everybody will be a quote unquote sovereign individual. But the reality is, and these debates also happened with crypto after a few years. But the reality is, at the end of the day, the government matters. Government is the guy with the guns. It's the Haryanvi Tau with the stick. At the end of the day, whatever you want to enforce, there is a government behind it. And whatever you think is libertarian or in the cloud, some government has access to it. Then the question basically comes down to whose government would you rather have access to your data? So because let us be very clear, even Indian, as we internalize Indian data, I would be very, 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 very surprised if the Indian government does not maintain some kind of official, unofficial, semi-official backdoor. And quite frankly, if I was sitting in the government shoes, I'll also make sure I have some kind of, just leave it. Let's leave it at that, right? So if there is going to be access to our data, I would much rather that it be my country's democratically elected government. Are our institutions perfect? No. Are American institutions perfect? No. Are American institutions broadly slightly better than Indian institutions? Probably yes today, although that may fast converge or change. But nonetheless, I mean, I can be openly nationalistic if you want, tribalistic on this point, to the extent that the data must be shared rather with my government. So there is a national security angle, as you rightly said, and then there is a big economic security angle. Why? Everything that we are going to see in our lives are going to become digital one way or the other. Digital plus electric plus electronic, right? So, for example, even our electric vehicle cars are increasingly computers on wheels, and especially when we have self-driving cars, there'll be even more computers or AI on wheels. Now, all of that data is in the cloud, so to speak. Do you want somebody sitting in DC or Beijing to suddenly stop all your cars, to suddenly play with your digital power grids, suddenly make all your hospitals dark? Now, of course, the point is, in 99.999% of the cases, they will not do it. You have a nuclear weapon. How many nuclear weapons have been used in the world after Hiroshima and Nagasaki? None. But is there no real deterrence value to the nuclear weapon? There is. So the fact that somebody has you by the metaphorical balls does not necessarily mean they will squeeze it, but it definitely means that you will jump enough so that they don't squeeze it. And therefore, you want to avoid being in that situation to the extent possible. Now, smaller nations may not really have the scale or the capacity to do that. So I am not even trying to make some morally self-righteous case that मैं जो बोल रहा हूँ वो जमैका को भी करना चाहिए. Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to package it with that moral self-righteousness and with that naivety. I am simply saying, today, being part of the world's largest polity, as a proud citizen of India, I think it is absolutely a shame if we today give our entire data completely without, they don't even ask us to bend and we are crawling. The DPDP, the Digital Privacy and Data Protection Act, has been passed finally in 2023 after immense US lobbying. We still passed it. The rules are being framed for 2025, again a delay. And the US is just absolutely hell-bent, especially under Trump, that all of the data should be open for my AI to internalize. You should not have any regulations or data localization or data privacy or sovereignty regulations, because that is just hindrance to free trade. Of course, on goods, where the US has lost its economy of scale, it's now clearly number two to China. Their logic is completely flipped. So the US is doing honestly what I may have done in US's place. Now the point is, the US is a trade-off. In the US's case, the trade-off worked that the Western Europeans and the Japanese and the South Koreans agreed to certain things in exchange for a particular security umbrella. Part of that was accepting the suzerainty of the US dollar, part of that was accepting in recent years suzerainty of US big tech. But what Trump is simultaneously trying, and that's something you can only push so far before it breaks, is that he's trying to reduce, not fully take back, but reduce the security umbrella while extract more economic resources. In the case of India, let us be very clear, we are not dependent on the US security umbrella. I am not saying that we are in a great position. We obviously had a mini war with China over Galwan 5 years ago. I'm sure the US helped us out with some intelligence, military intelligence, and GPS, etc. There also, we are trying to be Atmanirbhar or sovereign with satellite data and our own version of GPS, etc. But I am not saying that we are, as many people have succinctly summarized on various platforms. The problem with India currently is it's too large and too proud and too independent to bend the knee, but not quite there completely powerful to be entirely a pole on its own. Right? It's in this liminal zone. I would argue that if we were forced to choose, we are very much a pole of our own, but we are probably, along with the European Union, which is not quite a pole, but if you count US, China, Russia, and India, we are probably the weakest of the four poles. Russia being only slightly ahead, Russia having much more destructive capacity, but not enough economic constructive capacity as of now, although, of course, a great store of commodities, etc. So we are a pole, but we are probably the weakest of the major poles. So this is the overall context where US has applied 50% tariffs on us. A lot of these discussions, I can absolutely assure you, just a couple of quick points before I throw it back to you, and then we can start discussing casually various parts of solutions. There is no fixed SOP. The US has put 50% tariffs for us. I can rest assure you that the government, which is, I salute the government, full on respect for them for finally making the right signaling noises. Full respect to Sridhar Vembu, Zoho, and everybody else who is making India big tech kind of products in India, including smaller companies like Map My India. Full respect to people like Sharad Sharma of iSpirit, who are now working with people like Sridhar Vembu to try to, where possible, create our own big tech, but to the extent possible, not have any big tech. But I'll come to the example of Arattai and WhatsApp and where digital public infrastructure applies. And very, very quickly, one thing that I will just say once again: do not confuse our giving access to the US for their big tech platforms with them using our our India-based global capability centers, IT services, offshoring business. Whole H1B thing also happened. The Hire Act is in the US Congress. They are not doing anybody a favor by that. The just the talent pool in India, the salary divergence, just the labor arbitrage, the cost arbitrage, the skill sets, the linguistic skills, that is the reason why they are here. And to the extent this can be automated in 2-3 years or partially automated, they will not be here. So this is not a quid pro quo the way it is presented, that, oh, we are exporting IT and business services to the US or US Fortune 500 or the leading multinationals there, and because they are very generously buying these services from us, therefore it is incumbent upon us to give them carte blanche access on their big tech platforms. When China in 2008-9 gradually created what it's known as it's the Great China Digital Firewall, the US, it was already too late for the US to curtail Chinese manufacturing beyond a point, because the scale economies had built up. So the US can do anything, but there is no replacement for Indian skill set living in India. The depth. So it's Philippines is too small. Poland, if you want to go to Warsaw, Krakow is too small. You can go to parts of Mexico. Some mid-level jobs you can do in cheaper cities within the US, like go from New York to Austin, etc. But one or two will go to Canada because of the whole, again, the visa arbitrage thing. But the sheer scale that the mid office, the R&D office, maybe not the complete cream. The cream maybe still they'll call to onshore, but absolutely below that, there is just no replacement for that India talent pool. So this is not in any way a favor or a quid pro quo. That is very important to understand. We may still not, and as I said, the summary is we are not banning it. We'll now discuss various solutions. But whatever we are doing, we should not do this from a position of fear. As I think the single biggest service that Donald Trump has done to India has, by in some ways, having gone for the jugular, a made us all realize, or see, you and I, for various other reasons, in different ways, maybe Americophiles in terms of the constitution, the people, etc. And I see personally no contradiction in remaining an Americophile and being a foreign policy hawk when it comes to America. There are two different things in my mind. But the reality is, Donald Trump has removed that patina of whatever high sounding rhetoric there was. This is good old classical geoeconomics, and we have to do what we have to do, and we have to play our hand to the best of our capability. So that's a broad preface. Now we can openly discuss various nuanced solutions.
So I want to respond to through three things that you have said here. Point number one, yes, I am probably very openly along with you. I like to use the term openly pro America. I have always been very openly pro West. Forget pro America. I admire many things about America, but my admiration for America, just like you, is not at the cost of Indian sovereignty and Indians, Indian integrity. That is not the case. See, here's how I look at it. When you words like big tech and bans are used, people have to understand there are layers to these things. Now, a messenger app is not the same as a Twitter or a YouTube or
Okay.
a Facebook or an Instagram. Different purposes are served by different platforms. A Microsoft Word solves a very different purpose compared to another version of that. There are different reasons for different things. I firmly believe that we should not close our market to any of these things, because at the end of the day, then you also should have the native capacity to build that. uh, we should take our time, and when and even after taking our time, I believe we have to see what is happening. But yes, to have a thing like not having an option of a domestic server where data cannot go out, I'm sorry, it's absolutely ridiculous that India accepted it in the first place. See, if your data is local, then there is no issue. In my in my personal opinion, if the data protection bill comes and it's properly done, a lot of these problems, I think 90% of the problems are solved. Then you are in the 10% gray area where things are much bigger issues. I believe shutting down all American big tech will not be. Yes, using Instagram as a cudgel or a stick to beat America with in the negotiations, I understand. In a tongue-in-cheek manner, I even tweeted it out multiple times. I was like, we should ban Instagram because Instagram has such a giant user base that they basically, Instagram benefited with India banned TikTok. So for people who say, oh, you cannot ban them, well, we banned the most popular platform on planet Earth. TikTok is not available in India. Life goes on. First of all, creators went to Instagram. The Indian economy went on Instagram. So if you ban Instagram today along with TikTok, it's not like the creators will not find a new thing. So that's not the point. But the point is, should we do it? There is a giant question of network externalities. How do we solve that? We cannot be isolated from the world, right?
No, so absolutely, two, three very important issues. I think first of all of us should approach this with a sense of intellectual humility. This is a very, very complicated, fast moving topic. Number one. Number two, see, even if you store stuff in the Indian server, there is a gray area of contradictions between US laws and Indian laws. Like FISA Section 702 would still apply. So the US can sign on anything, And if something is to be delivered to their executive without a warrant, it's not like the US White House will tell the PMO कि हमने आज इन 50,000 लोगों का data check किया, right? So I mean, there are things which, so having a data on Indian server allows you to actually have a copy of your own data. There is a physical place that you can at least convince yourself, which is under your, lathi, under your police jurisdiction, under your judicial jurisdiction. But let us be very clear, data, once it is there in the cloud, is there. Now, to be fair, to be very, very fair, if they are outsourcing so much to us, right, at the company level, their payrolls, there's so many of their proprietary internal intra-company data comes to us. If not at the IT services level, at the GCC level, clearly we also have safeguards, and they have assured safeguards. I'm not saying that nothing can be done, no protocols can be developed, layers of trust cannot be developed. I'm not saying that, but when it comes to national security, the whole point is the exception matters, right? As philosophers have said, who is a sovereign? The sovereign is the guy who decides the exception, right? So you can have all kind of laws, but ultimately the sovereign is the person who decides the exception. So there is a contradiction. So I would not be saying 90% will get solved, but yes, it is the bare minimum that has to be done. Number one. Number two, as you rightly said, yes. For example, हम SMS करते हैं. You may be on Geo, I may be on Vodafone, somebody is on Airtel, somebody else is in the US or Hong Kong or wherever, and an SMS reaches, right? SMS is in that sense an open protocol. It is an interoperable protocol. Similarly, email. If I send you are on Zoho Mail, I am on Gmail, I send you an email, it reaches, right? There is an architecture which takes care of it. An app like WhatsApp is a walled garden, right? So it is deliberately playing on network effects. And a very important nuance point you brought up is the global access, right? If you have, you remember Facebook ke pehle ek app hua karta tha, Orkut, and Orkut was like really hugely popular with Indians and Brazilians for some reason. It was like big in India and Brazil. So there is a question of, if we have an India wall, there is a huge problem indeed to this thesis if one approaches it in a simplistic manner. What happens to the global interface, right? Because China may be doing XYZ things for national security and economic security reasons, but let us be very clear, the Chinese Communist Party defines national security in a very expansive manner. It is okay if the average Chinese is not able to very conveniently speak with the average non-Chinese. Although that's not the case. I mean, like all kinds of virtual IP, etc. solutions are there, which are used all over China. People can use even US platforms in China, but it just adds a layer of complexity and gives some benefit. By the way, Russia is also doing it right now. It's not formally banned Viber or WhatsApp, etc. It's just made calling on it difficult, and it has launched its own app called Max. Europe is making a lot of noises about going against US big tech, but of course, given their security dependence with respect to Ukraine, so they are doing 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Now, coming back to India, for example, on WhatsApp, one solution which is proposed by Sharat Sharma and Sridhar Vembu was, something like a DPI, like you had ONDC for e-commerce. It took off not beyond a point. Or you have UPI. UPI is the protocol on which PhonePe, which may be owned by Walmart, or Paytm, which is now owned by the foreign owners have gone, or Google Pay owned by Google, they all plug and play. But even if you are on Google Pay and I am on PhonePe, or somebody is directly using Bharat Pay, whatever, we can all give money to each other. Again, like SMS or email. What is not like this? WhatsApp is not like this. Telegram is not like this. Now, WhatsApp having that massive network externalities. What does network externality mean? Very, very quickly, it means that if 100 people are on a network, it is that much more attractive for the 101st person to join that network. If 1,000 people are on the network, it's much more than even 10 times. So the one point where I'll just partially nuance what you said is, yes, we should have good domestic alternatives, but then it's a chicken and egg situation. If you don't actually give them space or market access, given that this software system, especially some of these aspects of software, have such massive scale economies, network externality is just another word for extreme scale economies, that these are natural monopolies. If you had no economic or national security reasons, we should all be on WhatsApp. WhatsApp, if there are 3 billion people, why have a second app, right? It's because of some national security, privacy, or economic reasons. Because ultimately, the point of an app is to speak to each other. So there is a foreign angle. There is also how do you create a group, like we are, so many of us are on WhatsApp groups, etc. अभी मैं SMS कर रहा हूँ, you, it goes to you even though you're on a different protocol. But how do multiple people from different groups be on a chat group, right? So there are many things to solve. But the idea proposed by Sharad Sharma of iSpirit and Sridhar Vembu of Zoho, for example, is let us create this messaging protocol which is beyond SMS, which is online, internet based, and not phone network based. And others can all kind of plug and play into that as a front end, the way PhonePe or Google Pay does on UPI. So that's a step possible. How then it connects to foreign messaging is the next step to solve. UPI connects to foreign payment networks, but there, of course, there is a added nuance of the capital account control. In, of course, there is no message account control. You can send as many messages to foreigners as you want. Capital account control has different economic and financial reasons, which you can separately discuss. So this is a technological solution to solve. If it can be done through some kind of DPI way, I'll be extremely happy, because then I am not replacing a US big tech with an India big tech. I am replacing it with a DPI based platform. If it can happen, I'll be very, very happy. But the point is, then over time, you'll have to force all messaging apps who can be downloaded in India, either via iOS or Android. And let's not even talk about India having its own OS like Harmony and the way China has. वो बाद में आते हैं. You have to make it compulsory that all of them are using this protocol. Because what will happen is WhatsApp will have such massive inertia and economies of scale. And since so many of us, for example, you lead half your life in Canada, half here, many are NRIs, सबके कोई ना कोई रिश्तेदार है, family members हैं. And then it became very tricky. Like WeChat in China never expanded much beyond the Chinese diaspora. And of course, the US was also not very happy to allow that, because the US, the moment an app is not in their app, they are very acutely aware of national security reasons. When TikTok was forcibly sold last week, the AI, the algorithm of the app was given over to Oracle. So it was not just a financial transaction. They understood that, if they can decide what is seen in our elections in terms of what is prioritized, what is retweeted more, what is retweeted less, etc., then it has real socio-political economic consequences. So again, Gmail does not have that network externalities or SMS the way WhatsApp has. It's a different dynamic altogether in Office and OS, as you rightly mentioned. And in none of these, a ban should be the very first step. We are close to the US, closer than to the Chinese, although honestly, beyond a point, let us not have any illusions about it. But nonetheless, we are closer to the US. That's a fair statement. What can we start to do which starts to constrict them? I'll just end this particular point with this last sentence for now. So many sectors we've opened up over time, right? Insurance, auto, retail, etc., etc. We never opened up those sectors on day one. People argue, and retrospectively हमें day one पे कर देना चाहिए था. हमने करके देखा एक सेक्टर में, ITA, the Information Technology Agreement of WTO. Unlike the auto sector, I've discussed that also with you once before. That was the cell phone sector, etc. हमने खोल दिया day one में. हम 2017-18 के बाद, अब हम PLI के बाद में we are winning that consumer electronics hardware share of the world from a very, very, very low base. Finally, we are now exporting iPhones. Gradually, we are increasing value add, because हमने 2 साल के अंदर वो WTO एक्सेस करके, उसका ITA एक अग्रीमेंट था 96-97 में, by 98-99 हमने ऑलमोस्ट जीरो कर दिया. So Bharti Mittal, before it wasn't a telecom operator, was a cell phone manufacturer in Ludhiana, if I'm not wrong. Beetle phones जो बनते थे. So that a lot of people, he's obviously a well-known example, but so many people who had hardware manufacturing units, after 10 years, were all going to Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, and they all became importers. By 2000, our electronic consumer hardware value add was lower in India than in 1990. वो लिबरलाइजेशन हुआ, हमने बहुत कुछ अच्छा किया, करेंसी डिरेगुलेट कर दी, सर्विसेज टेक ऑफ हो गया. हम भूल जाते हैं कि देयर वर मेनी सीरियस प्रॉब्लम्स विद मैन्युफैक्चरिंग. अगर आप उस ITA करते, लेकिन आप 5 साल के बदले 15 साल में करते, हाँ, हो सकता है यार imported laptop would have been 5 or 10% more expensive, but you would have manufactured laptops in India in 98, 99, early 2000s, as opposed to early 2020s. A 20-year gap opened up between you and South Korea and China and lately Vietnam. So there is a real issue. So हमने हर सेक्टर में फेज बाय फेज खोला है. हमने सॉफ्टवेयर में कभी जेवी करने को नहीं बोला. हमने सॉफ्टवेयर में कभी नहीं बोला कि you must have an Indian partner and that you must have an India listing the way George Fernandez forced. We just assumed the zeitgeist was, oh, it's so libertarian, Washington consensus. Just open. It's a different universe. It's a parallel universe. Open up everything on day one. And I think we must, now that we are looking back with the benefit of hindsight, we must be objective and understand that that was a mistake. That the way we opened up completely carte blanche, we could have done this more step by step. Now to reverse it also has to be done step by step. It cannot be done by complete bans on day one. That is not the right way.
So then, okay, I understand that as far as messenger apps are concerned, what we are looking at is something like the UPI, where basically we own the protocol on which all these
Yeah.
people operate. Now, okay, fair enough. But there are so many questions like, do we have the server capacity? Do we, and look, China did it at a time where the internet was not that big a thing. Today, the internet is an integral part of your life.
Yeah.
People are, used to a lot of these platforms. And if you take it off, have we have we considered the second order, third order effects of those things?
No, it's a good point. See, internet is very big. The only answer to that is it'll be even bigger in 10 years. So, I mean, kaal kare so aaj kar. You just have to do it. Whenever you realize you have to do it. Is it more painful today compared to 20 years ago? You're absolutely spot on. Will it be more painful 10 years from now? You'll be correct with that also. So, iska kuch upay nahi. It's like, I've now decided to lose weight. I should have done it 5 years ago, but better now than 5 years later, right? So, that's one of those things. You just have to do it. Number one. Number two is you said, of course, messenger में ही है, बाकी में. There are many things. For example, one way to push a particular product is to have coordinated procurement. So one simple way of coordinated procurement is at least get your government officers, your bureaucrats, your PSUs. You can at least nudge them to go towards a particular software suite. Which again, to be very fair to the government, they've already started. So Ashwini Vaishnav, all of this I'm sure has come from the PMO, right? I don't want to comment on individual ministries, but I'm pretty sure this has come from the PMO. So the PMO has basically told ki bhai ab aap push karo products like Zoho because we already have a stack. Now these guys need that extra visibility and income, and that will pay for the extra server capacity and everything that you mentioned. So for example, Sridhar has already tweeted that we are massively adding server capacity. It's now in the last few days much more downloaded than WhatsApp. He's also clarified that his company is all headquartered and the servers are all in India. I used to be earlier associated with National Stock Exchange as an independent director on the board of their Gift City unit, and I can again tell you that even there, we have very very minimal exposure to US big tech cloud based services, both for regulatory national security but also data sovereignty reasons. So ऐसा नहीं है कि इंडिया में कुछ हो नहीं रहा है, and ऐसा भी नहीं है कि at the very high level ministerial communications we don't have some safe lines and वो सब है. But the point is, at that level के नीचे भी बहुत कुछ है ना. There are millions of employees.
It's about scale. It's at scale.
The scale is the magic word. Scale is the 5-letter scale is the word which actually is the one word summary of this entire discussion. So you have to give that initial scale. So one way is to use your existing government bureaucrats PSUs to get that initial scale. वो एक बोलते हैं ना वेंचर इन्वेस्टमेंट्स में मिनिमम वायबिलिटी प्रोडक्ट मिनिमम वायबल प्रोडक्ट बन गया कि अभी क्या है कू में. But then that is a carrot. Talking up your domestic products also a carrot. Giving some potential industrial subsidies, incentives, one way or the other, managing it in a gray area, a carrot. But you have to have the option of a stick on the table. That does not mean you use the stick. Now, the most simplest way of using the stick is by having strict regulations which they have to follow. So, for example, X had I think Karnataka High Court में Government of India के साथ केस चल रहा था कि जी हम तो नहीं मानते गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया की बात, ये तो आपके ही सेक्शन 66 के खिलाफ है, वी बिलीव इन फ्री स्पीच एक्सेट्रा. The government, You and I can be free speech maximalists, but if there is a platform which is not ready to take a defamation, etc., liability on its own, then it claims it is just a pass-through mechanism, whatever the technical term be, it's just a pass-through mechanism. Then you remain a pass-through mechanism. You can't be both a pass-through mechanism and an adjudicator of free speech. If you're a pass-through mechanism, you just implement the country's laws. Whether the country's laws should be freer for speech, in bracket, yes, both you and I will agree, but that is for the country's parliament to decide. That is maybe for the country's judiciary to override in whatever activism that justified or not. But that's not for you to decide. You cannot be this messiah कि मैं सिलिकॉन वैली या मैं सियाटल से आ रहा हूँ, मैं ऑस्टिन से आ रहा हूँ, ओ ये लाइक तुम गरीब लोग को समझ नहीं आ रहा है, हम डिसाइड, दिस इज नॉट लगान, राइट? सो यू हैव टू इम्प्लीमेंट the country's laws. So this extraterritorial, this idea that the government will constantly go back, then they will make the government run around in courts, first the high court, then the Supreme Court, this thing has to stop. They of course do it for smaller countries. Smaller countries, they know how to play it. In India, this is completely unacceptable. I think I'll be the first person to support that India itself has freer speech. I'll be the first person to say that, listen, whatever your oversight, national security oversight on a foreign app, please don't have higher than that for local apps, in theory. Then क्या होगा, फिर लोग ही बोलेंगे कि नहीं, मुझे तो प्राइवेसी चाहिए, वो अमेरिकन ऐप ही बेटर. So this is, to be very fair, this is something, the responsibility that the government will also have to earn. That again, I'm saying I would rather want my government to have that data. At the same time, perception matters, and the government should not be seen as being too cavalier in asking for it, right? The US does whatever it wants to do. It does not go to the court. Section 702 FISA does not require it to go to court. तो जो चीज नजर में नहीं आती वो नजर में नहीं आती. So there has to be many ways to slice and dice it, but combine it with public procurement, combine it with carrots and sticks, combine it with suasion, with pushing domestic products, and then with strict implementation of data protection and data privacy, you will then create the environment in which automatically some domestic alternatives will start to sprout. If required, you force JVs. Even if they keep 51%, you force JVs. If required, you force domestic listings so that there is a domestic equity base in this. But the idea that 1.5 billion people should give their data lock, stock, and barrel and not expect any security or economic upside from that is absolutely ridiculous. That is not how a great power should behave. That is incumbent on us given our scale. So there are many ways to skin the cat, as it were, slice and dice it, but इसमें multiple instruments लगेंगे. One very important instrument is the Competition Commission of India, the antitrust mechanism. So antitrust mechanism is another view on which over the last 10-20 years I've changed my views. Like from strictly libertarian point of view, antitrust is kind of silly, right? If you have too low prices, they say you're dumping. If you have too high prices, they say you're price gouging. And if you have the same prices, then they say you're cartelizing. But basically, you cannot win. So the free market argument against CCI or antitrust is very clear. Until you mature 2 steps further and you realize antitrust in all countries today is an instrument of geoeconomic statecraft. It is basically, if two MNCs are merging and some parts of them are merging, all major countries have a veto or a partial veto on that thanks to their CCI, thanks to their equivalent of CCI. So within India also, why should a Google browser be pre-installed on a Google OS app? यही तो famous case हुआ था Microsoft Internet Browser का 1990s में. So there are many ways to tighten the screws without outright banning. And I think the government has finally come to the conclusion this has to be done. To be fair, it took some time. To be fair, Trump Baba also finally moved the needle for us big time in the now and here. But now, if the mind is made, there are many ways to do this without poking the bear in the eye. We don't have to be funny khan for the sake of it. And I don't think outright bans will be required in most cases.
देखो इसमें ऐसा है कि we can also try this as a first step. We have to make sure that data localization has to be made compulsory, and apps that are not made in India have to be charged an extra
Yeah.
tax or something.
So digital tax is something which has been discussed often. Digital
But Trump
tariffs,
has
that's one.
threatened that people who charge our big tech a digital tax, I will tariff the
Oh,
shit out
so
of them.
but obviously that means that's exactly what he's afraid of, right? He's almost kind of shown his hand. So I'm not very doctrinaire about a digital tax or especially a tariff. करे तो अच्छा है, नहीं करे तो बहुत अच्छा है. But उसके पहले again many things. For example, your headquarter may face whatever restrictions or sanctions. You have to give in a written underwriting. If you are serving Indian clients in India, you have to follow Indian laws. So if Nayara Energy, for example, is an Indian incorporated refinery in which Russia has X stake, or Russian companies have X stake, but it is an Indian incorporated with a register of Indian companies, etc., you can under no circumstances withdraw access of their data, of their software from them without the Indian government's go ahead. So that has to be part of the underwriting. And if you're not okay with that, then you please withdraw. So again, you always leave the obligation. You always leave the decision to exit if they decide, which trust me, they will not easily. But the decision to exit, you leave it on them. You say कि हमारे ये conditions है, आप ऑपरेट करो ना, किसने मना किया. बट अगर आपने हमारे कोई क्लाइंट को एक्स्ट्रा टेरिटोरियल सैंक्शंस व्हिच इंडिया इज नॉट एक्सेप्टेड you apply here, then you please forfeit the license here. So by doing something, everything in writing, even if you eventually end up in a de facto ban situation in one or two verticals, you have the paper trail for that. You have the complete rationale for that. You say, no, listen, we very clearly said an Indian company should get these services. You cannot impose European or American sanctions in India. If you do that, then you please don't serve here. That's fine. We are allowing you to serve here. We don't mind if you are not Indian, but then you have to follow Indian rules and regulations. That's it. So then if that person, let that person make a decision and go and lobby his government कि भैया हमारा तो इंडिया एक्सेस छूट जाएगा. Then let that country take a decision whether they want to sanction XYZ in a global extraterritorial sense. You put
I,
the onus.
I have one question here. Do you think that a lot of Indian foreign policy analysis fundamentally underestimates India's leverage?
100%. So I think this. Thank you for asking that question. I think we've discussed this also before. I fully agree. I am not delusional about India's weight, but I do think the consensus about India's weight underestimates it. I think the fact that we are the only real swing power. The swing power is a polite euphemistic way of saying the only other emerging pole, and whoever this emerging pole aligns with, that pole basically wins. Right? The next stage is we don't care who wins, we want to win. That's the final stage. But in the interim, also as a swing power, see, even before all of this big tech signaling by the prime minister and his cabinet, the very fact that the prime minister just went to Shanghai Cooperation Organization SCO meet, I think in Tianjin near Beijing, and just shook hands, held hands of Putin and Xi. Like it, I have never seen India covered that much in the US press uh, in a long, long time. I mean, that was a veritable geopolitical, geoeconomic earthquake. I often say, what was British policy as regarding the European continent? No one dominant power should appear in the European continent from a British point of view. They should all keep on fighting each other. Simple policy. Because अगर कॉन्टिनेंट में एक स्ट्रांग पावर आ जाएगा, वो किसके पीछे जाएंगे? ब्रिटेन के पीछे जाएंगे. Same thing if you do this world Eurasian continent and America as the offshore balancer, America as the great power which is kind of away from this world island in its own smaller island of North America. The idea always was who are the great continental powers in terms of sheer demographics and power, if not power, latent power. There's only three: Russia, China, and India. Right? There is, because Africa is not one country, Latin America is not one country. Russia has the world's largest landmass, and India and China the only 2 billion plus populations. So if literally Russia, if you force India to go towards Russia, the hey thore dos, but even closer to China, because if you really force us, then we say okay, we can. If we really have to be humiliated there also, Let us try to find a modus vivendi with China. China also, the PM went by after signing a Philippines security pact and going via Japan, by the way. And even now, the TikTok is not unbanned. Many XYZ investments have not started flowing from China. Indian government has not allowed it. So the Indian government has signaled is if you push me, ठीक है वो democracy नहीं हम तो वैसे भी we've never been evangelists about democracy unlike you in a hypocritical manner. Not for us, democracy is important for our own national character, integrity, and unity. Secondly, China is not from an Indian civilizational perspective. It is also a state which is dealing with, to put it bluntly, the two proselytizing universalist religious ideologies. China is doing it its own way. India will do it its own way. Xi Jinping just recently said the signification of all religious worldviews is necessary. So if really it comes to it, India can find a modus vivendi with China. उसमें कौन सी बड़ी बात है? अगर उधर भी टेंशन है, इधर भी टेंशन है. So I mean, again, the Indians and the Indian elite, by nature, for various historical contingent reasons, would prefer to be friendlier with America than China. Let us be clear today. But equally, Americans would be delusional if they believe that under no circumstances India and China can get along. Many, many weirder things have happened. The French and Germans were literally killing each other 80 years ago in the millions. Right? I mean, they are together leading the European Union. There is no historical animosity between India and China. There was always the Tibetan Himalayas in the middle. There's one of small cases in the 8th century, something in Southeast Asia, what was colloquially and colonially called Indochina. There are no reasons, there's no fundamental reason why India and China cannot get along together. If the Chinese are arrogant, the Chinese may also find the Indians to be arrogant. उसमें क्या है? वो तो modus vivendi की बात है. So I think the idea that we cannot ever get along with China is an axiom that must be interrogated, including by Indians themselves, definitely by the Americans. So I think we have enormous leverage. We will quite, I say it, I mean, very, very seriously, we are quite likely to be the world's largest economy in the second half of the century. Not in PPP terms, like in hardcore market exchange nominal terms. Some people may say second or first by 2070. I may say by 2045, 2050. 10-20 साल का ही तो फर्क है ना. What is that in a civilizational time scale? So nobody can in any way doubt the power, the influence, the latent power, and the trajectory of Indian influence, except Indians themselves. We are very, very good at that.
Chalo, I'm gonna take questions now. किसी ने लिखा है, remember Baba Ramdev launched a Satvik messaging app with much fanfare. It didn't last a week and we are actually thinking of replacing MS Office. I honestly don't buy this because the one difference between Ku and Arattai, क्या नाम है? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Arattai. It means
So
casual chat.
casual chat. Okay, so the government is pushing this one. The government was not pushing coup.
Yeah.
Let's be very clear. No minister was talking about coup. And wait till the
Yeah,
prime minister talks about Arattai.
Yeah, and वैसे भी MS Office, I mean, first of all, who are the people working for Microsoft? Many of them are the Indian diaspora, right? Secondly, people say, oh, the Indian market is too small. But who said if Indians develop some version of Microsoft Office? By the way, there are many open source versions already available for OS and Office. But let us say we create some intermediate hybrid branded open source OS and Microsoft Office. We'll also export to the rest of the world, no? The global south will also export to Europe. Remember, France and Germany are also completely livid about being dependent on US big tech. All of their data is on AWS, etc., etc. Right? I mean, they are very much aware how dependent they are also on the US. Now, imagine how Japan and South Korea are being treated. They're being said कि $500 billion लेके आया, तो $400 billion लेके आया. तो openly हफ्ता चल रहा है. So we might very well be in a world where by the early 2030s, Japan tests a nuke. And it will be the ultimate irony, but it's possible. And if Japan tests the nuke, and if they finally give up on the US security umbrella, let us say, India is bigger, they have their own nukes, etc., then what is the reason for them to kowtow on the geoeconomic side? The geoeconomic and the geopolitical are always joined at the hips. So the idea that India itself is will not grow, that's wrong, but will grow and also sell whatever it makes outside of India as well. Indian software will not be limited by Indian scale. Uh, anyway, latent scale is enormous, but current scale, I agree, is limited. But even in the current scale, if you go by US big tech revenue, there are underestimates. They do not count all the revenue, especially the profits, fully, because a lot of it goes via Ireland and tax havens, etc., where they show intellectual property. So see, in any software, by definition, if you understand the economic angle, the marginal cost of producing a software duplicate is zero, almost zero. आपने सॉफ्टवेयर बना लिया, अब आप माइक्रोसॉफ्ट ऑफिस अपने पे डाउनलोड कर रहे हो, तो आपका तो डाउनलोड करने का खाली इंटरनेट लग रहा है ना, या आपकी स्टोरेज कैपेसिटी लग रहा है आपके लैपटॉप पे, बट माइक्रोसॉफ्ट इज चार्जिंग यू लेट्स से $100 or $200. So the marginal cost of it getting new customers in India in a growing economy, the world's largest polity, the marginal cost is almost zero. So the actual profit contribution margin in an economic sense, which is very different from the accounting sense, is much higher. Then not to mention the multiples. If you are listed as a company, you get higher multiples for growth. Anyway, they are on a very high side of multiples today. We'll come to AI also. So the idea that India is a very small market and it will only remain limited to India, no, obviously not. So Baba Ramdev may have made some funny app, but this is a very serious app by very serious people. And Zoho, by
Yeah.
the way, has the entire stack. And Zoho has been exporting software, including very much to the US for a long, long time. So various kind of
Yeah.
SaaS
Yeah.
services, Zoho Payroll, Zoho this, Zoho equivalent of CRM, Salesforce equivalent. So this is not a fantasy. दो चार महीने पहले गुस्सा हुआ विम पे कुछ बना दिया. This is very very serious projects. Yes, are they as good as some aspects of US big tech? No, but scale मिलेगा तो it can be even better.
भाई स्केल मिलेगा तो क्या सारा इंडिया का जो टैलेंट बाहर जा रहा है उसको हायर नहीं कर लेगा वो? यार ये भी तो मतलब
देखो अभी क्या हो रहा है, तुमने इंस्टाग्राम बोला, लेट अस से आई वांट टू एडवर्टाइज टू यू, ठीक है, आई वांट टू एडवर्टाइज XYZ फाइनेंशियल सॉल्यूशन ABC बुक टू कुशल मेहरा, हर्ष गुप्ता वांट्स टू डू दैट, ठीक है, हर्ष कर रहा है कुशल को थ्रू अ प्लेटफॉर्म जिसमें काम कर रहा है, मान लो लेट्स से समबडी कॉल आदित्य, ही इज वर्किंग, ही इज आल्सो इंडियन, बट उसका पूरा ट्रांजैक्शन का रेवेन्यू, प्रॉफिट, टैक्सेस, 99% टैक्सेस, बिकॉज़ देन देयर आर ऑल दीस काइंड ऑफ ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग इश्यूज, वो सब अमेरिका में जा रहा है. And imagine, this is not a small country. This is not talking about Venezuela, Bulgaria, etc. We're talking about India. We're talking about 1.5 billion customers and potentially paying customers over the next 10, 15 years. So if I create a platform, imagine what this is worth for Meta. You've already lost China. You lost a 1.5 billion polity. You lose another 1.5 billion polity. तुम किस मुंह से अपना को ग्लोबल बोलोगे? और यूरोप भी आपसे खफा बैठा हुआ है. Or whatever you create you can probably sell for cheaper in Latin America and Africa. So for the US to have access to India carte blanche, big tech, is not just about current profits or more importantly future profits. It's also in a game theoretic sense about preventing another competitor. So there is an element of we are not just losing economic upside or national security. There's a huge economic opportunity cost also of serving our own people, but then B, using this as a beachhead to expand globally. And आप उनका पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी एक्सप्लॉइट करो ना. आज अमेरिका और चाइना में इतना झगड़ा है, टिकटॉक का उन्होंने एल्गोरिथम अल्टीमेटली ओरेकल को दे दिया, बट बिकॉज ऑफ द वे द अमेरिकन पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम और डोनेशंस वर्क, अमेरिका डिड नॉट इवेंचुअली बैन इट ना. चाइना कुछ बेच के ही निकला उसको. इंडिया में तो मोदी जी ने बैन कर दिया, गुस्सा आ गया, बैन कर दिया. उधर तो they did not ban it. He sold it for $13-14 billion or whatever, the Chinese. So there are many ways to play this, but the first and foremost thing is the two most important points which you have mentioned according to me. One is scale, and the two is the constant underestimating of our own influence and our own power. Because one final point on that is, see, America may have many more aircraft carriers and this and that. America wants to remain global number one. जितनी चादर है वो उतने पैर फैलाए. इंडिया का एम क्या है? America wants to be number one and have a unipolar world. चाइना का एम है, रशिया का एम है, यूनिपोलर वर्ल्ड नहीं होना चाहिए. रशिया बोलता मल्टीपोलर होना चाहिए, चाइना मन में सोचता बाइपोलर होना चाहिए. इंडिया बोलती है देयर शुड बी अ मल्टीपोलर वर्ल्ड एंड अ मल्टीपोलर एशिया. Right? So everybody has different layers of current ambitions. For your given current layer of ambition, your strength is more than enough. With passing time, your ambitions will also change, possibly. But the idea that because America is so much more powerful, we have no leverage is complete nonsense. I mentioned about IT services and the kind of what you can call elasticity of demand. Elasticity of demand is is very very weak with respect to any tariffs or prices, because demand is very sticky for American demand for Indian offshoring. Whereas a lot of American products can be relatively substituted by Indian products. The technology involved is not very cutting edge. This is not nuclear rocket science something. These are products which are fine, somewhat complicated, but because they already have the first mover advantage, the winner takes all inertia, scale economies, network externalities, whatever you want to call it, that they become very very sticky. That in turn funds their further new projects. Like Facebook started as a way for college guys and girls to meet each other, like each other's posts. I mean, I was in the US when this started, so about 20 years ago. Today it is investing in nuclear fusion. It's gone from a college listings to nuclear fusion, because that scale gave it enormous profits. तो फिर वो हम हमेशा रोते रहते जी R&D नहीं हो रहा, R&D नहीं हो रहा. R&D कैसे होगा अगर आपकी कंपनी में प्रॉफिट नहीं है? R&D कैसे होगा आपने प्रोडक्ट के लिए कभी पॉलिसी इंटरवेंशंस नहीं करी? R&D कैसे होगा आपके इंटरेस्ट रेट्स बहुत हाई हैं? So this concept, again, I know many good friends who have a different view, but this constant need to berate Indian corporates or Indian culture or Indian strategic thinking at the private sector level, ठीक है, वो दिल को बहलाने के लिए अच्छा है. I don't think it has analytical use. And any whatever issues there may be in Indian corporates, that also change. I mean, the whole point of these people is they want to make money. So you should not berate Indian corporates to do R&D and capex, right? It is incumbent on the policy architecture to create the incentives thereof. कोई इनकम्बेंट नहीं करेगा तो कोई नया आज श्रीधर वेम्बू के बारे में 10 साल पहले कितने लोगों ने सुना था? कितने लोगों ने जीरो था सुना था, अपस्टॉक्स, एंजल वन सुना था 10 साल पहले? The idea that only a few conglomerates are taking everything away is complete nonsense. If you look at the concentration of Indian listed companies in terms of percentage of market cap, it's lower than the US. So if the architecture is there, if the incumbent does not step up, somebody else will step up. But policy architecture, incentive, the suite of carrots and sticks have to be there. And therefore, ये सोशल मीडिया में I'm sure you've seen कि हमारे इन्फोसिस ने वो नहीं किया, TCS ने वो नहीं किया, उन्होंने डिविडेंड दे दिया ना. अब वो बहुत सारे एक्चुअल एंटरप्रेन्योर्स बन गए बैंगलोर में, रेस्ट ऑफ द कंट्री में. But can any of them individually take on US big tech with even $500 million of VC funding, growth capital, etc.? It's not realistic. Zoho has done this step after step. It first took one niche, it made it a cash cow. That allowed it to invest in another cash cow. Right? Now it has reached a scale where it is able to seed multiple verticals. I was honored and fortunate to meet Sridhar in his village, wherever he lives in Tenkasi. Great guy, very, very different thinker. And I knew back then only that this guy is very special. And I'm so personally happy for him and the entire Zoho group that in many ways their moment has come. But may 100 Zohos proliferate. Why? It's not about one company. So उसके लिए अपने को एक particular policy architecture चाहिए. So I am not of the mindset कि just to constantly give galis to the Indian private sector. I don't think it serves any purpose.
In fact, to back you up, I remember last time I had gone to Mukul Agarwal's house. Mukul भाई हमारे चेंबूर में रहते हैं. उनका लड़का अमन, you know Aman. So Aman had told me, he was like, यार कुशल लोग बात करते हैं, of all the food delivery apps in the world, only Zomato is the profit making app on planet Earth. There is no other app that makes money other than Zomato. बोलता है यार हम लोग अगर इतने निकम्मे होते रहे तो हम लोग ने ऐसी कंपनी क्रिएट कर दी जो पैसे बना रही है इस चीज में, तो इतने भी निकम्मे नहीं होंगे, कमी है
नहीं,
मगर।
हर कंट्री का इनोवेशन अपने उनके सर्कमस्टेंसेस से होता है ना। अब आज लोग बोलते हैं जोमेटो स्विगी वैल्यूएशन इज अ सेपरेट टॉपिक, बट लोगों को मजाक उड़ाने में बहुत मजा आता है कि जी ये तो चीप लेबर एक्सप्लॉइट कर रहा है। अबे तो चीप लेबर को नौकरी मिल रही है ना, ये एक्सप्लॉइट क्या कर रहा है? ये बोलने का क्या तरीका है
भाई
कि कोई
लोगों के
धंधा कर
घर
रहा है
चल
तो
रहे हैं, 40-40 50-50 हजार रुपए कमाते हैं लोग यार, क्या बकवास है।
नहीं, तो आप ऐसे बोल रहे हो कि ऐप बैन कर दोगे तो जी इनको कुछ उनको बेटर ऑल्टरनेटिव मिला हुआ था। So, I mean, see, so long as the value add gets created online, which is why I'm in favor for some version of progressive taxation. Another point of view that I've changed. It should be rational, reasonable, etc. But let the rich pay more taxes, and in fact, even slightly more as a percentage of their income, not just more in absolute amounts. But वो तो तब होगा ना when that value add is happening within your borders. अगर वो value add आपके borders में नहीं हो रहा, तब आपका labor immiserization हो रहा है, टू द एक्सटेंट वो सच में हो रहा है, दैट आर्ग्यूमेंट वी कैन आर्ग्यू, बट आपका एक कैपिटल ऑफसेट भी नहीं आ रहा है। If there is a capital being created in the country because the startup is yours, onshore, then based on that rich person getting taxed, you have some welfare schemes, you have some redistribution, you have some safety net, so that if somebody falls, they don't fall through the cracks. So then similarly, आज हम $3,000 पर कैपिटा इनकम में है, अमेरिका $90,000 पे। In some areas of national security, we must have an industrial policy, including a digital industrial policy, software, hardware industrial policy. But in some areas, more traditional sectors, it will make sense for us to do only R&D in the 2030s. We are not quite there on the cutting edge. आज Naveen Jindal, for example, is looking to buy ThyssenKrupp, a German green steel kind of manufacturing company now. So आज हम JVs के through or acquisitions के through we are internalizing the IP. We are in that phase right now. So you to compare this with the cutting edge sector is different. Our sector, I am again asking, are you of the opinion that basically all of these promoters are idiots? There is some secret R&D which they'll do, which will increase the value of their own companies, their own long-term profits. But उनको किसी को ये vision नहीं आ रहा है, आपको बाहर बैठ के ये vision आ रहा है. Because apparently this deduction has become commonsensical for some. ये कैसे हो सकता है? I am not saying that all the entrepreneurs are correct or the next generations are some great geniuses. But that is the point of competition. जो नहीं है, they are getting weeded out. They are not scaling up. They are not becoming huge. So in different sectors, a different kind of R&D intensity or a different per capita income level is required. And in 2030s, it will be very different. It will be much more private sector led. आज के दिन वो state led होना जरूरी है. तो आज गवर्नमेंट ने किया है 1 लाख करोड़ का एक R&D fund of funds बनाया है. फिर they've made a big pool of venture debt which can be given to these. So the government is doing so much. उन्होंने अभी shipping में उन्होंने they've put an industrial policy. They've expanded PLIs, and जहाँ पे mistake हो रही है, they are changing and tweaking. So there is an element of, as Deng Xiaoping would say, crossing the river by feeling the stones. So there is a iterative process in this, as Sanjeev Sanyal also often says. There are first principles, and then the execution is very much contingent on how you go about it. So isme, again, we are not wedded to any particular idea, but as the value add, the national security angle, these things have to happen in India. If we can, हम कान ऐसे पकड़ने के बदले अगर ऐसे पकड़ लेंगे तो उसमें, that is not the important point. This is not an ideological debate. This is a debate about what will work. And the problem is, if you now every time you discuss this, you start about 1970s में license राज हुआ था कि तुम license राज करना चाह रहे हो. Will the government pick winners? First of all, the Chinese government has shown that the sectors that are rising. It's not like some rocket science. Does that mean occasionally you'll end up blowing some money on some sector? Yes. That is the point of industrial policy, that there is trial and error. Without error, there is no trial. So now Americans have paid the ultimate compliment to the Chinese. They're starting to follow their model. Trump is taking individual stakes in companies. Intel में 10% stake ले लिया. So my point is, it's not the American Washington consensus that's correct. It's not even the Chinese model that's correct. तुम देखो बैलेंस में तुम्हारे सिस्टम में क्या सूट करता है, जस्ट कीप एन ओपन माइंड अबाउट इट। इफ समथिंग वर्क्स, इसलिए उसको मत मना कर दो क्योंकि 1970s में कोई इंपोर्ट सब्स्टिट्यूशन का लाइसेंस राज हुआ था, उसमें भी हम नुआंस डिबेट कर सकते हैं। एंड देयरफॉर anything the government does is bad. This Indian state capacity is doomed to be always negative and corrupt. It can never do anything constructive for the country. Then ठीक है, the India story is over then. Why are we discussing this? सब बोरिया बिस्तर बांध के निकल जाओ जो निकल सकता है. That is not an argument. That is cynicism writ large. Whereas if you objectively look at it, is the Indian state capacity leaving a lot to be desired? Yes. But is it also improving over time? Yes. So then you play on that trajectory.
So, question to both of you: do you think the benefit of hindsight? Do you think it is wise to give permission to Starlink to start its own operation in India? I say yes. I don't know what's
Yeah,
Harsh's
so see
opinion.
on Starlink, my point is, I think the government, I saw a couple of interviews of Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia on this. The government has said that they have enough safeguards in terms of how the data will be used. And if the government says that as a first cut, I'm okay to believe that. I think without those safeguards, I may have had a different view. But at this point, let there be more competition. Anyways, given the high cost, some UHNIs will use it, and otherwise people in hilly areas, etc., will use it. So right now, even with hindsight, even with the fallout of Trump and Musk, let us be very clear. One of the reasons we were initially saying yes to Musk was as a way of doing a favor to the broader Trump administration. Of course, now they have fallen out. But given that the government is saying there are safeguards, for now, I think it's okay. If it becomes too large and there are ways like X did a case against the Indian government that your requirements on stopping this or that content are against our ethos, etc., and they try to paint against your constitutional ethos also, वो तब देखेंगे. As of now, I would hesitantly fall in the camp of Kushal that ठीक है, अभी allow कर दिया तो it's not a big deal.
Okay, this is a good observation. South Koreans use Kakao for literally everything when Google Uber is available. We should use Indian apps and make sure they offer a tailored experience. एक मैं just उदाहरण के तौर पे बोल रहा हूँ कि जैसे इमोजीज या वो सब होते हैं ना, जैसे वो उसमें पैरी पेना और ये सब, अगर तुमने इंडियन इमोजीज करने शुरू कर दिया ना, फट करके इंडियंस उस पे चले जाएंगे और व्हाट्सएप विल बी कंपेल्ड टू यूज इट.
Yeah, so I agree. So there is an element of localization. WhatsApp can also quickly follow again the brute force of scale and network externality and inertia should not be underestimated. So, for example, I've been arguing with people on WhatsApp to go away from WhatsApp. It's the ultimate irony. On X about US big tech, right? Uh, Many of our work office groups, not just personal groups, are still on WhatsApp. Some of them have gone to Signal, some are going to Arattai. So it is inertia. The switching cost should not be underestimated, which is why ultimately the state is the final stick, which should always be there in the background as the final negotiating tool. अगर आप ही preemptively बता दो कि जी कभी भी बैन नहीं करेंगे, then also it's a problem. But always start by saying ban is not the first preference. हमारा भी first preference नहीं है. But to say we will never ban or somehow it is morally wrong, constitutionally wrong, that cannot
Never.
be
We banned TikTok यार. We banned
yes.
TikTok.
नहीं, फिर वो बोलेंगे ना कि वो सीसीपी था, ये डेमोक्रेसी है, वो तो अपने हैं वो. All I mean, all of the Indian elites, half of them have relatives or themselves have lived or worked or studied in North America, particularly the United States. So whether we like it or not, there is an element of cultural affinity, if not co-option. Co-option may be more restricted to people who may have various forms of financial or other interests there, but most people, including myself and yourself, have some version of diluted cultural affinity, right? So there is an logo ke man mein TikTok and Instagram is not the same thing. Even though, as you rightly mentioned, TikTok ke ban ka biggest beneficiary Instagram tha, no Indian app like ShareChat, etc., could really fill that gap, despite being relatively by Indian standards well funded. अब आप AI में जाओ, उधर $100 billion $1 trillion के नीचे कोई बात नहीं कर रहे. इंडिया में जी $1 billion इज ऑल्सो अ बिग डील. $1 billion में तो इंसान वैसी वैल्यूएशन में यूनिकॉर्न बन जाता है. So the scale is different. We saw some versions of that with industrial revolution 1.0, Manchester, etc., making all of these textiles. So any good country, any good sovereign always retains the right for industrial trade policy. But any good sovereign also uses it very, very deliberately and with after a lot of thought. So long as we are not happy-go-lucky and completely uh, very, very impetuous about the whole thing, I think we'll be fine. And I think the Modi government has very clearly shown that it very, very carefully thinks through various steps. You and I will know that we've been shouting about this for a long time. Government अब जाके थोड़ा सा signaling कर रहा है, and I think that is also a good step because obviously trust me, the US is noticing. I mean, many people from US embassy communication officers etc. follow you and me on Twitter. So ऐसा नहीं है कि इन सब चीजों के बीच में not at all to overestimate our importance. There are 100 other people who are talking about this in various forms, but in सब चीज की report बनती है, everything gets noticed, and if it really comes down to it, you can expect some ugly fights indirectly astroturfed within India also on this issue. Uh, US big tech, you have to understand, with manufacturing having gone that scale, it's still number two America, but that scale having gone to China, the US will not easily let go of its big tech dominance. Please understand that. Uh, Trump, who is the biggest cheerleader of US big tech, was himself deplatformed by all of them as a sitting president in January 2021 as a sitting president. Now, of course, he's sued all of them. He's getting another form of personal hafta, $24 million abhi aaya idhar udhar, whatever you want to call it. Let me not, okay, let me not ascribe motives. Let me use more careful language. He's getting money paid through the US judicial system. But he has become the biggest cheerleader because he is the state now, and the US big tech is nothing but an extension of the US state. And to that extent, he is obviously cheerleading what he now represents. Again, the idea that any country's big tech can be dramatically antagonistic and separate from its state is not a realistic view. It's a naive view. और अगर स्टेट से ज्वाइन होना ही है, then I come back to my original proposition, let it be my state. अगर this is the way 21st century life will be led, then let not all of the data all be centralized in DC or Beijing. Then let large countries like India or European Union in aggregate have their own data pools, and we can have enough interface across these pools. Then why should everything be in a metropole neo-colonial sense go all to Beijing or in some cases DC, or DC or in some cases Beijing?
Okay, next. If India were to put pressure on tech, wouldn't that target should be Chat GPT? It is the only thing propping up their tech market.
See, see, our aim is not
इंडियंस कैसे
necessarily.
या तो कुछ मत करो या तो बम ही मार दो साला.
It's our aim is not necessarily to burst their current quote unquote stock market bubble. That's not the aim per se. See, when the last .com bubble happened, the valuation went crazy. I think the market peaked. Nasdaq 100 peaked 11th March 2000. Um, of course, eventually internet transformed all our lives, but in the immediate short term, they were not profitable. But huge amounts of undersea internet cables, etc., all of that hardware was laid. Just like earlier bubbles in the US and UK for railroads, etc., meant a lot of rail lines were laid, not always profitably. Unlike, of course, the lines they laid in India, where they got a lot of compensation, the Britishers. But हमें आज भी याद दिलाते हैं कि जी हमारे हमने उन्होंने हमारे लिए रेलवे लाइन बनाई, whereas they got 10% guaranteed so and so return in those zamana जब there was no inflation. Uh, so uh, no, I don't think Chat GPT is necessarily the first step. There also, I would say, how can we try to squeeze it on data privacy, data sovereignty, data security, and then see how it responds. If it is ready to do a domestic JV in India, if it is ready to give complete control on data to Indian authorities as per proper procedures, if it is not taking the data and running it on its global algorithms without the knowledge of India. For example, AI within Apple in China is done through Alibaba or a Chinese company, not through Apple itself. So if it is ready to plug and play into the Indian regulatory system, let us give it that option. Let us not ban it immediately. Let us try to see how flexible it is for Indian regulations. If it does not, then obviously the natural process will follow in due course.
What will be the incentive for users to move in products when market is already captured? Apple has policy of not giving over data to government anywhere. अह, तुम सोचते हो
देखो
एप्पल नहीं देती है अमेरिका को, तुमको सिर्फ वो बताया नहीं जाता है।
देखो सेकंड लाइन थोड़ा सा नाइव है जो कुशल भी बोल रहा है। टिम
ऐसे
कुक ने
ऐसे
जाके कोई
इनोसेंट
गोल्डन
लोग हैं ना हमारी दुनिया में।
वो टिम कुक ने जाके कोई गोल्डन स्टैचू टाइप कुछ दिया ना डोनाल्ड ट्रंप
वो
को।
भाई ऐसे ही दे रहा है वो, यार छोड़ो यार, इतने नाइव नहीं बनते जिंदगी में।
I am not saying there are no internal processes, but realistically they have access. See, what is the incentive to switch? This is a good question. Firstly, the Indian market itself is rapidly expanding, right? Number two, again, if there is no incentive, ultimately it's a coordination problem. We may require various kind of state regulations, which is why I again mentioned data sovereignty, data security, data privacy, how the data is monetized, etc. What is public digital infrastructure side? What is private monetizable side? आप ये सब अपना पूरा फ्रेमवर्क बनाओ, अपना अलग बनाओ यूरोप और अमेरिका से भी, चाइना से भी। और जो इस सिस्टम में नहीं प्लग प्ले करता, आप उनको मना करो। देखिए आज क्या है कि who are the two biggest car manufacturers of India? They are Japanese and Korean respectively, Suzuki Maruti and Hyundai Kia. They are plugging and playing into the Indian auto and auto ancillary system. They are not exporting completely built units from Japan or South Korea, so they are benefiting from the system. They are also now have the listings in India. Indian retail shareholders can make money off their profits, at least a part thereof. Now there is talk of Toyota Kirloskar ka IPO, for example. So if there are ways that they play for the benefit of the broader Indian ecosystem on issues of security and economic upside, then why should we directly go for a ban? We should not. um, उसके बाद अगर हमें लगता है हमारे processes are better served in some cases by something tighter, we'll do something tighter. But as a first step, we should not do that. And even the intermediate steps may be enough for a lot of people to switch over to Indian options.
Why don't we have PPP in digital like physical?
I'm not sure I understand the question. PPP means purchasing power parity. So I think he means like digital services are of different prices. I mean, I'm not sure what the question means. I can tell
मुझे
you
नहीं
that
मालूम, मुझे खुद को नहीं
Chat
पढ़ा।
GPT, for
मेरे को
example,
लगा
हाँ,
मैं अकेला बेवकूफ हूँ, तो मतलब तू साथ में है मेरे।
नहीं नहीं, Chat GPT, for example, has lower priced options, so they have all kinds of price discrimination. So maybe that's what he means, like lower pricing. But
पब्लिक प्राइवेट पार्टनरशिप तो नहीं?
oh, I think so. Right. I think you're right, and my apologies to the question asker. मैं इतना macro econ में घुस गया कि मैं public private भूल गया. Yes, exactly. So see, Indian digital public infrastructure is an excellent example of PPP. So if you have the UPI protocol that is quote unquote public in this form of NPCI, but then the app on top of that is a private entity, including in many cases foreign entities. So absolutely, PPP is the way to go. But uske andar bhi, how do we make sure that the private part is not all foreign is something that we have to be cognizant of. So yes, absolutely agree with the questioner. Yes, public private partnership is the way to go.
Hi Harsh, is this true that Germany has just launched its own version of ChatGPT and it was nothing but a tie-up between OpenAI running on German servers?
I'm not sure whether they've just launched their own version. I think there's a European, it's a French company, which is a European version of Chat GPT. It's doing quite well. They are not raising money as much as Chat GPT levels, but as of now, um, no. I see European aspirations to tech sovereignty are right now more aspirations. It's not because the Europeans can't do it, it's because of broader geopolitical dependencies they have on the US, namely, for example, the Russia war, Ukraine issue, energy security, their own internal coordination. France has nuclear weapons; it does not share with anybody. Germany has the biggest checkbook in a sense. It does not always share it with other people. It's not exactly like ASEAN or African Union, but it is not exactly one country either. So, not aware of any latest version in Germany, but there are French or European models which are there, but they're not as well funded as of now as ChatGPT or Perplexity, etc.
All right. So next question is, someone has said, I don't agree. I've worked in consulting companies and they are so corporate that they push towards consulting instead of spending any money in R&D.
No, that's an interesting point. First of all, the French company's name was Mistral. To the previous question, in terms of consulting, can you hear me, Kushal?
Yeah, yeah.
In terms of consulting, no, I see. I'm not saying there are no cultural factors at all. There are people who may not never have the vision to do R&D. My point is, somebody else who does will rise. The idea that if a particular form of R&D is profitable over time and nobody does it is something I find difficult to believe. Of course, many people won't do it, which is why they won't rise. But if it is profitable, some people will do it. Not just in the unlisted space, even listed space, which is one of the areas where I disagree. For example, with Sridhar Vembu, whom I enormously respect, that I mean, Reliance, for example, was investing in Geo for a decade. It was not very profitable. It was constantly adding expenses. Then the stock suddenly re-rated in 2 3 years when Geo launched, and there's a consolidation in the telecom market. So, is it always easy in the publicly listed space to have a long-term vision? Yes, it is difficult. It's not easy. Um, but companies do it in any case. There are many unlisted companies as well, like for example, Zerodha and Zoho, which are doing great. So the idea that some consulting companies are not doing R&D, correct. Some other companies are not doing correct, but some will do and they will rise. So I am more concerned about the fact whether it is profitable for anybody to do R&D in that sector at that point of time at the per capita level, given government incentives, given rate of interest, etc. That I am more concerned about. Is it sensible for at least some people to do it? Who does it is not my problem. Maybe the incumbents do it, maybe the incumbents don't do it. Somebody will do it if it makes sense. And we are deepening at the capital access ecosystem in India. It is much easier for people to become entrepreneurs even if they don't come from established business or industrial families. So, ऐसा नहीं है कि the is it completely open to everybody? No, but it's much more open compared to 20 years ago. So I am much more sanguine on that issue. कि if it makes sense, somebody will invest in it, somebody will push it.
ओके, ये क्वेश्चन का कोई
Not
हमारी
always,
चैट
but
पे
largely.
किसी ने ये कुछ तो एमपी का 75% इशू रिजर्वेशन वाला कोई
I think
एफिडेविट
it's
निकला।
73%. हाँ,
अरे भाई, वो
ये टॉपिक
सो
अलग है
आई
भाई,
विल,
टॉपिक अलग है. I just tweeted about it, but there's a separate topic.
नो, सो निखिल ने लिखा है, लेट्स क्लैरिफाई दिस, व्हाट इज बीइंग शोन इज एन annexure to the affidavit, not the affidavit itself. I am not aware of any language in the actual affidavit that supports the annexure, which is much older report which has been used in the past. A logical question is, why has it been filed now by the state? The easy answer to that is that the state will want to file all relevant documents to ensure that they are not caught off guard in any injunction hearing. That is just basic good sense in litigation. But yes, in the past, such a report was prepared, don't know by whom, and was filed before a court and rejected. Today, it is a relevant document to that limited extent. I do not think it is being used by the state of MP
Yeah,
at
so I
all as
think
a
this seven,
justification of its policy. मतलब क्या हो रहा, क्या है फिर, क्यों
73%,
बकवास कर रहे हैं लोग?
नहीं 73% का जो भी है, I'm sure Nikhil is right. First of all, anybody who wants to oppose it by constantly bringing it to political discourse is probably doing their own cause uh, more counterproductive than any kind of help. Secondly, I am more interested just to since आपने topic छेड़ ही दिया है कि 73 or 51 or 50 is a good Lakshman Rekha. I think EWS does not quite conceptually cross it, and at least national level पे नहीं होना चाहिए. All that is fine, but the broader point is, bhai, if you want to remove caste reservations, you have to remove caste. Please do not put the cart before the horse. You can be clever by half and try to reverse the causality. That's not how it works. Does the state mandated affirmative action lead to deepening of identities on in and of itself? Yes, I concede that point totally. Is that still the main driver? No. The main driver is still the reality of our society being divided on caste lines. And I agree fully that a lot of people who claim to be backward are not necessarily backward. But the reality is, once your sense of us is your caste community, then your politics represents the caste community. US people, for example. That's because in US, the majority one German American, Polish, itna Polish American, itna British American, etc. So it doesn't matter. There is no concept. You can't make the majority in the US within the majority. You can do that in India. So what is so surprising about it? That people were not
हर्ष तेरा
in the
इंटरनेट
country.
फाइनली दुखी हो गया है. हर्ष तेरा इंटरनेट फाइनली दुखी हो गया है. इट्स ओके. तो
I think
ये
call it.
तेरा इंटरनेट दुखी हो गया. इट्स ओके. फाइनली तेरा इंटरनेट मिल गया.
Call it a day.
Yeah, let's call it a day, guys. So once again, all the details are going to be there in the description if you're watching the YouTube version or listening to the audio version. You can follow Harsh on X. You can also read his Substack. Same with me. You can follow me on X, and all the details of whether my merchandise, my book, everything is there in the description of the podcast. And if you want to support the Cārvāka podcast, do consider joining the monthly membership program on YouTube or Patreon, or by sending one-time donations via UPI or on Interac Canada. I apologize for a little bit of the internet issue at the end of the podcast, but sometimes these things happen. As always, I thank you all for tuning in to this live session. Keep watching the Cārvāka podcast, and if you have not liked this video till now, please do click the like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment in the comment section, and leave a review if you are an audio listener. Until then, take care. Goodbye. Have a great day.